Hi, this is Mark Laxer. It's July 28th, 2020, and I am talking with my good friend, Gerette Buglion, who is a fellow Vermonter and has worked with me extensively on cult education projects. And hi, Gerette.
Hey, Mark, it is such a treat to be here, to be chatting with you, and even in the Zoom world. It's been a little too long since I've seen you in person, but it feels great to just see you and talk. And oh my gosh, can I just jump in with my
Please do.
congratulations for you on Rama Trauma Trump? It is. Obviously I've known about this for a long time, Mark, that this project has been like, kind of simmering for a long time in your heart, in your soul. And to see what you created, I just love it. So congratulations. And one of the things that can I ask you a question about it?
Yeah, but first let me say thank you very much. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, bravo. So I was surprised by and touched by the way that you brought your friend Russell into this story. And I was surprised because as long as I've known you, and we've talked a lot about cult stuff, I didn't really know about Russell. Maybe he was, mentioned along the way, but here in this book, Russell seems to play a really important role. And I would love to hear a little bit more about your friendship with Russell and how you feel about Russell today in relation to your cult experience from years ago.
Sure. No, thank you for that. So Russell is sort of my sensible friend. He always was sort of the one who would ground me. I was off exploring these wild ideas, and he was interested and curious, but he wouldn't quite go the distance I went because it was like maybe a little bit kooky, or a little bit too different, or I don't know. I shouldn't really speak for him. He's an explorer in his own way. He's traveled extensively. He's gone on amazing adventures, and I think maybe he does go to extremities, but in a different way than I do. Russell is a close friend, and I see the book Rama Trauma Trump in a way more about friendship and loyalty than I do about cults, because you can talk about difficulties and problems, but you also want to talk about solutions and goodness. And what Russell represents for me in my life and in this story, which is why I framed it this way, why I framed the story this way, is that the best things in life are about when you care about someone and they care about you, including in really hard times. So just a little step back a little bit, Gerette.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. So when Russell went off to college and I got involved in this sort of a early stage cult. I don't know if you could really honestly construe it as a cult in the early years. It certainly had some cult-like characteristics that I didn't recognize at the time. But we each sort of went our own ways. And then I was getting more and more involved in this group, and Russell knew that. And he came out to California. This is not in the book because, you know, the book's only 32 pages. My you know, you write a 200-page book that's not a graphic novel, you can get a lot more detail in it. So
that's coming next, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I do like the graphic novel form. I found that to be really enjoyable in terms of storytelling. And so Russell came out to visit me, and he knew beforehand, I believe, that it was a difficult situation. And what he did, he was putting his heart on the line. We were good friends, and he stood a good chance to be rejected. And that's exactly what he got. He showed up at a time where we weren't getting much sleep. We're fasting, and the meditation leader that I was studying with was he was saying that he was becoming enlightened. And I was living in the house with that, you know, this upcoming cult leader. And there was a lot of pressure on me. The cult leader, this guy named Frederick Lenz, or I guess I should call him Rama because, you know, out of respect to him, because that's what he called himself, right? So Rama, he was quite aware that people looked to me to assess Rama. Not entirely, I don't want to take too much credit, but I was seen as the innocent kid. Rama called me the kid. And people didn't necessarily trust Rama so much. I mean, in a sense they did, but in a sense they thought, and years later people came up to me and told me this. They said, Mark, because you were in it, I decided it was okay.
Interesting.
So Rama wanted to keep me very much in check. So there was a lot of pressure on me by Rama himself. He'd come up into my room at 2 a.m. and have long talks to make sure that I was on the same page as was he. That's when Russell showed up. And I saw Russell and the way he dressed, the way he held himself, what he represented. And part of me sort of like, gosh, I'd like to hang out with my friend, my buddy from high school. And, you know, we'd gone bicycling together, and, you know, we listened to Grateful Dead music a little bit, and just, you know, we're childhood friends. And there's something special about that. Yeah. Even if, you know, I don't know, we certainly parted ways when I joined this group. And there he was, making himself vulnerable. And I shut the door. And didn't look back. And I know that must have hurt him. And he went on with his life, and he's a very successful engineer and business person and world traveler. He's got a absolutely stunningly beautiful, wonderful family living up in Northern California. But that's, you know, that's now. But I don't want to give away too much of the book, but I feel that the aha moment of Rama Trauma Trump, I left the cult and now look what happened. The aha moment is my interaction and my friendship with Russell. And there he is on the wall. We're bicycling together. That picture I don't think is in the book, but I got it on my wall. But, you know, I care deeply about Russell, and I've got a lot of friends and who I care deeply about. And one thing I love about my life now is I can still explore. I can still go to the outer rim and
Right.
see about consciousness and different ways of seeing reality. And I could still have friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Rama didn't want that. He wanted to control that
You want it all.
emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting what you said earlier about that Rama, in a way, needed you to be someone who would actually um, help others to feel okay about him, about Rama. So, in a way, it sounds like Rama had found a way to use you as a recruitment tool. Is that true?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I was absolutely as a recruitment tool, and also to assuage people's doubts.
Yeah.
Because I'm the sort of intense person. It's like if I go for something, I'm going to jump way in, and
Mm-hmm.
people could see that, and so people felt like I was an innocent. That's
Mm.
how people saw me, and I've been around the block a few times by now, but I still think in my heart I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I like um, that side of me, of just not a lot of subterfuge, just um, make myself vulnerable. Here I am. This is who I am.
Right.
And I really believed that Rama Frederick Lenz was special. Um, and I was definitely recruiting. I put up posters and handed out newspapers all around every city and town in the state of California. Um, and we recruited a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I do think that in the world of cult education, which is something that you and I worked together on, as mentioned before, it's very easy to focus on some of the sexy things about the cars and the sex and the drugs and the rock and roll and all that stuff, and that often with these power broker cult leaders, that is part of the story.
It sure is. Right.
But I'm more,
Often.
what's that?
Oftentimes.
Yeah, often it is, but I kind of like to um, sort of explore just emotion on the emotional level. It's like, who are your friends? Um, and I do think I remember it, like if Rama was sitting right next to me now, I mean, he's since taken his life, but if he were here, I wish he were. I wish I could have conversations with him. I would really love that. But I think based on what I remember about the way he taught, I don't think that he would be all that impressed or excited or would support uh, the idea of friendship.
Hmm. Now, that's a really interesting observation. So, why do you think that's the case? Why would why would someone who's like a spiritual leader not support friendship?
I'd say there's one thought that comes to mind is that in a friendship, a real friendship, both parties make themselves vulnerable.
Right.
And I think Rama didn't like to make himself vulnerable, because if you make yourself vulnerable, it's not like this steep hierarchy where someone's up here, and it's not like this relationship is like this.
Mm.
And what I like is this kind of relationship more.
Mm.
I, at least in the past, I've kind of gravitated toward more of a peer friendship level.
Mm.
In Rama Trauma Trump, there's one frame, one page of the PDF of the story where this is in part one, where Rama takes a power drug. He takes LSD.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my relationship, in my whatever, studying with him, I saw he was very vulnerable. There was no one else in the room. He had called me in. He was having a bad trip, as they say, which just means that the LSD drug kind of takes over your world, if you will, your consciousness, and you have this, I guess for everyone it's different, but it's sort of this nightmarish experience. And so he called me in and I tried to help him through that bad trip. And it was then that he said to me, he said, hey, this is while he was tripping, Gerette.
Mm.
He said, we used to be friends.
Mm.
Do you remember we used to be friends? And I was crying and stuff.
Wow.
And I was trying to help him through this acid trip by saying, hey, Rama, do you see, I knew he likes birds, right? So I said, Rama, do you see these beautiful blue birds? Wow, they're all, and he'd look up and they're like, oh yeah, I see them. Of course, they weren't there, except in my imagination.
Right.
And he said, yeah, oh my God. And he got really happy because of the birds. So that was going on. But then he said, yeah, we used to be friends. He said to me, would you like to be my friend? And I was just tears coming down my face. And I said, Rama, I would really like to be your friend. And I said, yes. I thought early on, it was more like we were friends before he was doing more of the destructive cult thing where he was accusing everybody of stealing his power and saying that we're all evil and all this sort of thing. So, and he said to me, yeah, I'd like to be your friend too. And then he fell asleep. And then this whole LSD thing is like, you come down to earth after a few hours. And as he stepped off his tripping, I don't have a PhD in psychology, but I sort of understand to some extent what was happening. His natural personality was reasserting itself. And as he came down, he got less and less friendly with me, and he didn't want to be my friend anymore. He's like, a few hours later, he'd like wake up and look around and say, what are you doing here? And you're trying to steal my power and you're with them. And it's like, I thought we were friends. And he says, yes, you want to be my friend. You're trying to manipulate me. And then, but you see, Gerette, it all comes back to Russell. I reject that model of paranoia and steep hierarchy, whether it's in a one-to-one relationship or with my spiritual group or leader or with my political leaders. I reject that. I can have respect for people, and someone might be a little higher in some hierarchy than I am. I'm okay with that. But this steep hierarchy bit, I'd rather, I'd rather hang out with my friend Russell.
Right. Yay. Yay. And it's really, I find it so fascinating that you had that experience with Rama, around friendship, that he could, in that altered consciousness, have that, be vulnerable enough to actually be an equal, to have that true exchange with you of the innocence of a child, like, would you be my friend? Like it's this beautiful, vulnerable exchange. And yet in the consciousness, it sounds like he didn't really start out as like this kind of high-powered, power-hungry person, but that personality came back, as you described, and when he came down from the trip, and then it was like the friendship level was gone, and that's a really good example of one of those red flags that we have in terms of looking at destructive relationships or groups. Like, is there a hierarchy? Is there an unnecessary hierarchy?
Yeah.
Some situations call for hierarchy. It's not that, it's not that hierarchy in and of itself is wrong. It's that is it being used in a way that's actually inappropriate or taking control of someone, where clearly that was the case for you.
No, thank you for that. And one question I have, and maybe we can explore this in another conversation. Maybe we should make this into a series, because I know it's times of COVID, but I really miss talking with you and working with you. But my understanding, and I'm very curious to see if it's in there, but my understanding is you're working on a book yourself, and I'm assuming that this type of discussion about extreme hierarchies is something that you're facing in the writing of an everyday cult.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. That this hierarchy, and in fact, really looking at the hierarchy that you are pointing out in such a graphic way in your graphic novel, is that hierarchy with Trump, the President of the United States. And to see how there are, although my book is not about that, about Trump per se, but I feel as though any, like an understanding and recognizing, learning to recognize those traits, those nuanced and sometimes very complex and also sometimes very simple traits that exist in any group setting can be really helpful for people, to just bring that awareness into any relationships that they're having, with any groups, including, as you bring out in Rama, Trauma, Trump, our political alliances. And I felt when I started my book, An Everyday Cult, the first thing I said to myself was, I'm not going to get into politics at all. Like, there's no way I'm going there. I've got to really stay out of it. I've got to stay clean. And yet what I've experienced is the more that I wrote and the greater my understanding of these dynamics became, I hit this moment where I realized I couldn't truthfully bring my story out into the world through my book, An Everyday Cult, without recognizing and identifying the parallels that we get to see played out on the national and international stage literally on a day-by-day basis, on a minute-by-minute basis. You know, we have an incredible opportunity for a major consciousness shift in the American population to
Yeah.
understand cult dynamics in a way that we've never been able to see,
Yeah.
because they're right front and center. You know, we get to
Yeah.
see them in, you know, with an unfiltered lens on a regular basis.
Right, right. Well, I totally look forward to seeing your book for myself, and also just to have it see the light of day, and then maybe we can have some, you know, continue our discussions and delve into your chapters and the metaphors and challenges that you raise in an everyday cult. So listen, thank you so much for talking with me tonight. I do hope that we can continue this, and maybe this is one of 17 or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, or 1700.
Or
Which,
one of 1700. We look for, and don't forget, episode 89 is really good. Um, because
but I
that's what,
say that because there's so much content to cover.
so
We
much
could
to cover.
easily.
And so, absolutely, so much. And in the time of COVID, what better way than to Zoom it?
Exactly.
And
Yes.
very good. Listen, thank you, Gerette. And the kittens and I are saying goodnight from this corner of Vermont to your corner of Vermont.
Yay.
And wishing you absolutely the best. And we'll talk to you soon.
Excellent. And